But we start with what could be a pivotal day for the war in Ukraine. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will meet face to face for the fourth time this year. And on today's agenda for the Ukrainian president, Tomahawk missiles. Zelenskyy wants them so Ukraine can strike deeper into Russian territory, but it's not clear if President Trump will agree to give them up. So what exactly is a Tomahawk missile? The United States first used them for Operation Desert Storm. This was back in 1991 during the Persian Gulf War. And they can potentially fly more than 1,000 miles and weigh around 3,000 pounds each. And when it comes to length, the missile is around 20 feet long and a wingspan of 8 feet and 6 inches. That's huge. Now, keep in mind, today's meeting comes on the heels of a phone call between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump called that meeting productive. He says he and Putin will, quote, meet in an agreed upon location to see if we can bring this inglorious war between Russia and Ukraine to an end. But it's important to note here, Putin warns selling this weapon to Ukraine would further strain U.S.-Russia relations. In fact, the president says he asked the Russian leader about it just yesterday. Listen.
I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand Tomahawks to your opposition? He didn't like the idea.
And we've got team coverage. Standing by for us is CBS News senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab. But first, let's go live to Washington and CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia, thank you for your time today. What can we expect during today's face-to-face meeting with Zelenskyy?
Well, Mugo, as you just laid out there, those Tomahawk missiles are likely to be the top ask from Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. This is the fourth time he's meeting with Trump face-to-face, and those Tomahawk missiles continue to be the carrot that Trump dangles, either when he's talking to the Russians or the Ukrainians. When he talks to the Ukrainians, it's a potential that he might give them, and those long-range missiles would allow Ukraine to strike deep into Russia, targeting their missile depots, but also their ability, their oil depots as well, those energies that they're able to sell to India and China, being able to really sustain this war. So potential there. When he's talking to Russia, he talks about it in a way to be strong, saying that we might sell them to the Ukrainians, and that would prolong this war and give them greater ability to strike you and hurt you deeply on your own territory. We should note that President Putin's office did say after that phone call with Trump that any sign that they would give those Tomahawks would deeply damage the U.S.-Russian relationship, would also be detrimental towards any sort of peace with Ukraine. When Zelenskyy did land here earlier today, or yesterday, I should mention, he met with some of the defense companies that make those Tomahawk missiles. So this is likely to be the top ask today as we're waiting here at the White House to see Ukrainian President Zelenskyy arrive any moment.
Yeah, and Olivia, I want to go back to the president's phone call with Putin yesterday. He agreed to another meeting with Putin, but does Trump actually think this meeting will have a different outcome from the last meeting he had with him?
Well, Muga, that's a good question. We know that last meeting with President Trump and Putin happened on U.S. soil in Alaska back in August, and it yielded very little results. If anything, Russia actually ramped up their war in Ukraine after that meeting. There were not a lot of deliverables that came out of it. So the question is, what does the president aim to get out of a second face-to-face meeting with Putin in Hungary, which is a country that is, friendly with President Trump, but also friendly with Putin as well. Their leader, Viktor Orban, certainly not as friendly with the Ukrainians and President Zelenskyy. And there's also a question of whether or not Zelenskyy would be at that meeting. If you'll remember, when President Trump left that bilateral with Putin, he said it's now up for the two of them to meet. That did not happen. They tried to get that on the books. And as a result, President Trump is now meeting again with Putin. And the question of whether or not Zelenskyy would be there for a potential trilateral meeting is one that we hope to potentially answer today while Zelensky's here at the White House.
Okay. Olivia Rinaldi at the White House for us today. Thank you. And now let's bring in Imtiaz Tyab for much more on this. Imtiaz, again, thank you for joining us today. Are we getting any reaction from other world leaders on this request for Tomahawk missiles?
Well, look, I think the world, which has really rallied around Ukraine, of course, not least since Russia's invasion over 3 years ago now, but since President Trump's re-election, and the fact that at least very early on was incredibly frosty towards Ukraine. You'll of course remember that White House shouting match that was heard around the world with President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and of course Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Many people had thought that that relationship was essentially collapsed, and you saw Europe really rally around Ukraine. But now we have the potential that President Trump will sign off on Tomahawks being sent to Ukraine, which on some level would be an enormous game changer in, as we've been hearing, Ukraine's ability to target deep inside Russia. But again, if you take a few steps back and really look at what this could potentially mean, it means that although President Trump really wants to work with Vladimir Putin, we of course saw that summit in Alaska. We now have this potential summit in Hungary. In the background of all of that, the support for Ukraine is growing and it is real, and that is something that Ukrainians desperately want.
Yeah, and Imtiaz, you sort of touched on this just a little bit there as you spoke earlier, but what is your take on the impact of a missile like this on the war in Ukraine?
Well, look, I don't want to overstate it as saying like this is a fundamental game changer, that this will turn the tide in Ukraine's favor, that they will be able to take back the 20% or so of their territory that is currently occupied by Russia. But what it will mean is that it will be able to fight against Russia directly, take the fight to Russia in a way that it hasn't been able to do before. When we do see Ukrainian strikes inside Russia, it's usually drone strikes, it's usually because of intelligence, but this would allow Ukraine to target those sensitive sites inside Russia in a way that it just simply has not been able to do up until now. But again, Russia is vastly outnumbers Ukrainian forces. It is, as we know, relying on conscripts from North Korea. Russia has the edge, at least in sheer numbers and indeed in the volumes of weaponry, but these Tomahawks will certainly help.
All right, we'll see what happens after today's meeting. Imtiaz Tyab, thank you so much for joining us.